Let's start with a small presentation in We Love Replications Week. So I'm Susanne Adler. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute for Marketing at LMU in Munich, and I'm talking about cooperation with students to conduct replication studies, which is, first of all, going to talk briefly about, does it work? No. Okay, briefly about why we think that we need to teach replication research and also how we teach replication research at our institute. So why do we need to teach replication research? First of all, if you start as a student, you in general kind of have the ideal research workflow that you are taught and also that you think is going to be operated in science overall. Like you want to generate and specify hypotheses, you want to design a study, collect the data, then analyze the data, test the hypotheses, get the results, publish or conduct the next experiment, then from these results again generate and specify your hypotheses and so on. And overall of the time, then we should have cumulative science and we should achieve this promised land of trustworthy evidence where we really can trust like what we have been seeing in the published literature. Since we are in the Replication Research Week, I think many already know that this is not really how things are working in research. Specifically, that's not new because we had 20 years ago papers that said, hey, most published research findings are false, or we had papers that reproduced other research, did replication studies, and found that replication rates are kind of low. We had studies that explained why this is going to happen, how, for example, dissertation papers turned out to be these beautiful polished articles that we know, which some of the time has been done by, let's say, taking the original results and polishing them or changing them up until the point until they fixed more a fixed journal template. And over time, this is what cumulated into the well-known replication crisis or reproducibility crisis, depending on what field you are in. This term could be a bit different, but overall, many researchers can agree that we are in this kind of crisis, so that results are not as robust as they should be. And why is that? There are many factors that contribute to low applicability and reproducibility rates, some of which, for example, are researcher biases, like a hindsight bias or confirmation bias. If you expect to find something, you are more likely to see it in the data or to interpret your results in a way that fits your, let's say, cognitive narrative that you have been thinking about before. Another researcher bias also is kind of publication bias, where you say you are, first of all, might be more willing to publish results that are positive and that affirm your theory, while publish results that are negative or that do not show your theory, that are null results. And you as a researcher might just not be hesitant to do so, but also editors and reviewers would be more hesitant to accept studies that are null findings or that are negative, so that overall we have a lot of positive research, so positive results in our literature and not so much results that are not so nice to look at. We also have researchers' degrees of freedom, meaning that if you want to go from one place in a research funnel to another one, you have many options to do so. If you have a research question, for example, you can take multiple scales, you can take multiple approaches, different experimental design, different study designs. You can also take different data analytical routes, like what kind of estimator are you using, or would you want to exclude some participants or include them in the sample, meaning that even if you have the same research question or the same data, later on results could be pretty different. And another thing that contributes to low applicability and reproducibility is something that we call questionable research practices, meaning that, for example, researchers would change their data or just present a subset of the studies they have been doing or a subset of the data that would support their theory. This overall means that our nice research workflow has been kind of updated, meaning that we have problems from low statistical power, from p-hacking, from hacking, but also from publication bias and from a lack of data and code sharing, meaning that oftentimes we cannot even try to reproduce results. And also we have a lack of replications, meaning that for some effects that have been published in the literature and that get cited over and over again, we don't really know if they would hold if we would try it ourselves in the lab. And this is why I and we as a research group would say that replication and education are kind of a perfect fit. And that is on the one hand because literature needs trustworthy empirical evidence that could be, let's say, established with more replication studies, with really seeing how robust are our findings. And also to teach state-of-the-art empirical methods to the next generation of researchers or the next generation of practitioners, so that students would be able to judge what is a trustworthy research design and what could be some pitfalls in interpretations. How do we do this now specifically at LMU? So our case study right now, or how we approach replication studies, is in a structured format in a seminar that is in our master studies in business administration. So typically we can assume that students who go into this seminar have a basic understanding of statistics. So a little bit of multivariate analysis, a little bit of also how to conduct experiments, but most of them have never done an experiment before and have not heard about concepts such as power analysis or effect sizes or even Bayesian statistics. Which means for us, we are going to give a lot of guidance and be very clear about what we expect from students. So students, for example, are going to work in groups, which are typically 3 to 4 students, and they do a replication study with an extension. While doing so, they learn how to conduct the replication study by reviewing and assessing the prior literature. So how do I get from my original study to my replication study? Setting up and conducting the experiment, which also means if there are any, let's say, ambiguities, unclear aspects in the original study, to find out how to best approach this, and then collect and analyze the data as well as discuss the results. The students also later on get the option to be a co-author on anything that comes out of these replication studies in terms of, for example, a preprint or a paper, given that the studies themselves would fulfill the quality criteria for publication. Our workflow here is pretty much driven by the seminar structure and therefore by the semester. Meaning that specifically for us, we have a lot of work before, that is like choosing the topics, selecting the target studies, and making sure that they can be replicated by the students, deciding on the format. So is it just a replication or replication with extension? Prepare the inputs and templates that we are going to give the students. During the semester, students conduct the replication study, and here we, as the staff of the university, so supervisors, we help with conceptualizing, designing the experiment, we help with pre-registration, and also with analyzing, interpreting the data. And afterwards, for us, the work, so some larger part of work also just starts afterwards. That is, we have to check reproducibility, we maybe have to collect additional data, we have to finalize reports and appendices, and we have to prepare any kind of output that could be conference submissions, journal submissions, or preprints. Let's dive a bit deeper into any of these points and start with how we prepared replication studies. First of all, we only would consider topics that could be relatable to the students. So in our case, for the last seminar, that was about gift gaps. So giver-receiver asymmetries in gift giving. In general, receivers are much more satisfied with a gift than givers would expect. That is because givers think about what does this mean for our relationship if I give this product, and givers are also very tied in social norms. So they do not want to make a mistake by giving a gift, while receivers, on the other hand, are happy that they get something. And this is a nice case study. It is, first of all, because there are many data collection formats that are manageable for students, meaning we have many studies that could be done, for example, in an online study. And we do not have a subgroup or target group that would be hard to reach. At the same time, the experimental designs are appropriate. In our case, we wanted to look at main effects. And we did, for example, not want to look at attenuating interactions or any kind of research design that would require many participants, because we want to ensure that all effect sizes should be large enough that students could achieve a reasonable sample size at 95% power. So, for example, we typically first of all look for meta-analysis and then select what kind of studies out of this meta-analysis would be appropriate. So in our case, we had a meta-analysis by Freeling on gift gaps, and we selected studies that would meet all of our inclusion criteria. And of course, we did this before the seminar and then let students choose between different studies. For the setup of the course, students had to replicate the main claim, meaning the effect of roles, so being a giver or a receiver on a dependent variable. That could be the gift choice, that could also be a preference for a gift. Then we had a predefined extension part, that was in our case 3 mediators, and we had also the option to add other variables. For example, sometimes adding other variables was necessary because it was done in the original study and was theoretically important. Sometimes adding other variables also came from things the students thought about, or they were, let's say, necessary from a methodological standpoint when we had to make some changes between the original study and the replication study, to say that we at least would try to, let's say, control for the changes that we made. Before the seminar was also meant for us that we had to prepare a lot of input sessions, so taking into account what students know and what they don't know, setting up a course structure, talking a bit about the phenomenon, any study-related information about the original studies, putting into any method-related information, and we were looking at which templates could we prepare, for example, the structure of OSF projects, or any analysis templates, for example, in our case, NR, that we could just hand over to the students at the beginning of the semester. Which now brings us to conducting replication study. When conducting the replication study, we very much focused on the replication recipe as published more than 10 years ago by Brand et al. And we have put this into the workflow that we use overall for the seminar. Meaning students have different things that they need to do overall in the course. And this starts with they have to choose one of our predefined studies. They have to motivate the study choice. They also have to, first for themselves, identify what's the main claim, what's the hypotheses that they want to replicate. They have to get the materials, procedures, data analysis plan, and they have to be as precise as possible. If something is unspecified in the original article, then of course they have to make an educated guess. And this is also where we as supervisors come in, because here we are there to help the students to make reasonable educated guesses. The students evaluate differences between the original study and the replication, and they want to get the original effect size plus confidence intervals, then plan sample sizes, do a power analysis. This is also where we would be helpful if students struggle getting the correct effect size or doing the power analysis. We do a pre-registration of a replication attempt with a replication recipe, of course, before data collection. And then analyzing the data is one of the next steps, making materials, data, and code accessible, also understandable for the outside world. and evaluate the replication results, register the results. And all of these steps are during the semester conducted by the students with us as supervisors, ensuring that everything is up to standards for a later publication, which is then what comes after the actual semester. And here, research-wise, we check the data quality, and if necessary, we are also collecting additional data or make any appropriate changes, depending if something in terms of data collection went wrong during the semester or not. We check the correctness, reproducibility of findings, write a report. We also finalize materials, data, code, and so on for everything that would be relevant as an appendix. For example, also deviations from pre-registrations. Something else to look out for team-wise and publication-wise, we have thought a lot about what do we do with co-authorships. And for us, we have one clear requirement for co-authorship, and that is that someone would read and approve a final version of a submission. Everyone who would not be willing to say that they are fine with what has been written afterwards would be put into the acknowledgements. Also, we are choosing appropriate outlet for us right now. We did put the last study into a conference right now, and we plan to make a journal submission out of it. There are also a few red flags. So this is not the first time we did do the seminar. So what could go wrong? You could lose access to materials or data. This is also when I would just not try to publish the data later on. And also, if at some point I would lose trust in research integrity, then I would not use the study later on. The last point didn't happen for us right now, but it would just be a red flag for me personally. Okay, a few take-home messages. So collaborating with students could be very nice to advance scientific knowledge, also to teach state-of-the-art methods. For this preparation, expectation management is kind of everything, not just to have the students know what they will be doing over the course of a seminar, because a lot of concepts, a lot of things are new and not taught before, but also for the supervisors, because we as supervisors have to be more in a coaching role, and we also need to do sometimes a lot of iterations until something is, for example, ready to be published in a pre-registration. And this also means that we need to find a balance between guiding as supervisors and controlling what students are doing. And still keeping in mind that the supervisor is responsible for everything that is later on written. So if my name is on a paper, then I'm responsible. That for me means I'm not going to change every wording that students use, as long as I am fine with the content. If I'm not fine with the content, then I'm going to tell them why, and we can discuss this. But the content should be correct, of course. And it should be a content that would also pass some kind of peer review. The most obvious thing is if a calculation is wrong, then of course this calculation has to be redone. Okay, that's it for the presentation. On the right side, we have a small, let's say, advertisement block, first of all, for Replication Research Journal, and then for one of our later books that is like a small comic book about the Open Science Land. Thanks a lot.